It says we are live. We'll just give it a couple of seconds for the hardware and software to catch up with each other.
Okay.
It's a warming, guys. Here we go. Hi, guys. Welcome to Live and Undrugged, episode 24. This afternoon, I'm with Michael Emmett. This is going to be a good one. Thank you, as always, to my sponsors at No Means City Clothing and Armour Scaffolding. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Michael.
No, it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, I do warn people there are a few connection problems as usual. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Persist with us, and we'll be right. Can I take you back to the start, mate, and go back to
absolutely,
because your book is called Sins of the Fathers, is it?
And yeah, so, Sins of Fathers. There it is. There.
Tell me a bit about.
That's the book. Yeah, it's so you want to start at the beginning.
Let's go to the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, so well, I mean, right at the beginning, if we start on early days, was I was born in the council flats in South London. My father was a criminal, a career criminal. Come to that, you know, he was a sort of a war. He was born in 1933, but he was sort of went through the Second World War, and when all that finished, and you know, I think London was a completely different sort of thing then. His father had great hopes for him, and he went to sort of a technical college. His father was a bit of a crazy, God rest his soul, my grandfather. We had sort of, there was a big mental illness. I mean, my grandfather committed suicide. He was shot in the war. He was in a coma. He woke up a cripple, back bent. They used to call him Sticks. You know, he was a sort of very intelligent man. They say he had the level of intelligence as a doctor, but the war sort of really sort of, I think, you know, he sort of slaughtered that. He wasn't a very well man. My father had three sisters, three siblings. He ruled the house was sort of very, very strict man. He was a very strict man. He wanted the best for his children. My grandmother, Alice, they say she come from a sort of more of a middle class family. Her family was civil servants. Just when you're starting, noise everywhere. He was civil servant, and so she come from a good background. But my grandfather was a very aggressive man. Like I say, committed suicide. He drank acetone. They found him with the line of his stomach coming out of his mouth. Pretty heavy situation. My dad had fallen out with him. Prior to that, there was sort of things that went on in the family, but it was quite dysfunctional. So instead of my dad taking up a career as a surveyor, he was at Wandsworth Technical College. He turned to boxing as a young man. He was a good boxer, a good amateur. And it created a sort of a different clientele of people. He was from Battersea. It was a tough little area. You had the likes of Freddie Foreman. He was a Battersea boy. Charlie Wilson, the train robber. There was a lot of people there. Arthur Sutty, an old bank robber. And they sort of, not only because they were criminals, but, you know, they were war children. They didn't have no money. And he, you know, he took to stealing. And then he graduated through crime. He was a very tough man, my dad. He was Irish descent. He was a very, very, not that I'm claiming that he's great, but he, you know, he could really have a fight, Brian. He was an aggressive man, and he suffered. You know, he suffered. He was very weak emotionally. I found out as years went on, and that hence the book Sins of Fathers. You know, I have a strong belief in the ancestral sin of years gone by with ancestral behavior does come through. You know, even if you want to keep it away from the Bible and you just go into our sort of our DNA, our makeup, you know, we seem to copy what our forefathers done. We look like them, we sometimes sound like them, but the key for me was I repeated behavior that I wasn't taught. Yeah, as a sex addict, a drug addict, I was very angry. I'd had sort of some abuse at a very young age, which sort of affected my sort of relationships with women. And as much as I had all that darkness going on, he tried to be a fantastic father, but we said we lived the lie sort of thing. And the lie that we lived was that he was a criminal, but he made out he wasn't. At a very young age, when I was about 6, I'd seen a little bit of violence twice. Once in the car where he chased a guy. I was very young, and then another time I was with him. I'd seen him. It was a guy that he had a problem with, and he parked me up round the corner. And this is not to disrespect him in any way. And he had a fight with this guy. And when the guy ran round the corner to run away, he fell against the car. It was sod's law. I was sitting in the car. I was only 7 or 8 or 9 maybe. And the guy's face fell against the window, and it frightened the life out of me. And I don't think my dad meant that at all. But when you get impregnated with fear, it's a tool that the enemy will use against you. You know, whatever enemies you want to class it at, whether you call it the devil, you call it dark, you call it the karma, whatever you want to call it. I know what I call it. And so the journey of destruction started for me at a very young age. You know, I sort of weren't, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I weren't a bad looking kid. My dad used to dress me smart. So on the outside, I looked all right. I had a marvellous mother, and I had a marvellous dad as well. But my mother, she was a beautiful woman. She was a complete opposite to my father. Her system was based on love. She come from a very wonderful, beautiful, loving family. And I'm not saying my dads weren't a loving family, but there was dysfunction there. And it's grown and grown and grown. And I can see it in my sort of cousins, bless them. We've all struggled with drug addictions, prisons, violence, loads of things, same-sex relationships. And I'm not judging anybody, but I've seen the destruction of that in a number of my relatives. On my mother's side, I'm not saying they were a better family. They just happened to be built differently. My grandmother was a staunch Catholic. God rest her soul. And my grandfather was a hard-working man. He used to work in Covent Garden selling flowers. So the home was always fun. There was a piano there. There'd be lovely singing going on. And there was a community in my mum's brothers and sisters that came down from their family that we had, you know, we adhered to. And it was fun. It was friendly. It was kind. And it was wonderful, my mum's family. But on my dad's side, there was a lot of sort of headaches and sort of dramas with a lot of us, you know, and there's no judgment. There's been deaths in the family. My father lost 2 sons. His sister lost 2 sons. 2 of his sisters lost 2 sons before the parents died. So it's a little bit like a curse, I suppose. But so we got moved out of New Malden, and so sorry. Can I just hold on for 1 second? Just 1 second.
Of course, that's fine, mate.
I don't need to be rude, but I want to observe it. I can hear it. So that's all right. Just being a little bit quiet. Sorry. No problem. No problem. Sorry about that, Gregory. And
that's all right.
Anyway, we're all right to make it more funnier, wasn't it? So on that note,
my kids might come bursting in a minute.
That's my godson and his mate. They're 2 lovely boys. They're just having a bit of lunch out there. I don't want to disturb their time. But anyway, so you know, we moved down to New Malden in Surrey in 1963, just after the Great Train Robbery. You know, it was a very secluded sort of, I wouldn't say it was a posh area or anything like that. I mean, it had its moments down there, but it was a good area for schools. It was a very different environment to what I'd been used to in the flats. I love the flats. I'm from the flats, the council flats, but that was also a good community. There was always a lot of love and friendships there. But down in New Malden, it became like a sort of a bit of a paradise. I didn't fit in there. I went to school, a primary school where they were really sort of posh kids. Not posh kids, but not that posh is good. I'm not, you know, we're all the same. We're all human beings. So I don't mean to, it's not a class distinction I'm trying to put out there, but they were different to me. My sister, she loved it. Very, very bright, grade A student. My younger brother was born in Stockwell, but he was only a year old when we went down to New Malden, and he sort of he got involved with what it was like there. He was a wonderful kid. He was a beautiful boy, my brother, and he enjoyed his life. He was free from the. I'm so pleased he never got what I got. He was free from it. You know, he was a bright boy, a very lovely boy. And so my sister and my brother, they fitted the bill, and it made my dad very happy. You know, my sister went on to be a school teacher, you know, a headmistress or deputy headmistress, head of school. You know, she done very well in her career. My brother, sadly, something tragic happened to him, but I'll get to that in a minute. So we was this sort of Surrey family, living in a sort of a semi-detached house in a lovely road opposite the vicar, Mr. Chart. We had a nutty dog. We created a football team down the road. A lot of the people in the road who lived there was a number of police officers, their children. So it was quite funny. Their children played in the football team. But lo and behold, there was a couple of old faces who was involved. They had their sons playing. And as it would happen, there was a fight. It was under 11s. There was a fight by the parents. My dad got involved. Two other fellas got involved, and we got slung out of the league. So, you know, it was there all the time. I can remember as a kid, my dad had me in the swimming pool down in Kingston teaching me to dive. I was quite a good swimmer. And years ago, they used to put a little band on you, and you had 45 minutes in the swimming pool. Anyway, my time was up. I took the dive too many. The guy came round, there was two of them, I'll never forget, dressed in white trousers, white T-shirts and these white trainers. Anyway, my dad said something. One of them kicked my dad in the mouth. He fell back in the swimming pool. And it was the first time that I'd seen my dad really go into action. And he could box, this guy. I mean, he'd done karate. He could fight. And I'm not praising that up, but he was a tough man. And like I said, but he was weak emotionally. He has a fight. There's kids from my school there. The guy gets thrown in the swimming pool. So it was a contrast to what the statement he was trying to make, that we was a clean, upstanding family. And that's not a judgment against my dad or my family. What he wanted was for his children to succeed in life. He wanted to change the sort of the direction that he had gone in. He wanted to change the narrative. He wanted his children to succeed at school. My brother and sister did. I never. I left at a very young age. I started drinking when I was 11. You know, I think we don't become addicts. I think the addiction is an illness of the mind, the malady of the spirit, and I copped for it. You know, there was a lot of alcoholism in the family, a lot of drug abuse, and I got it full on. And I'm not sure whether it got, you know, if it increased with power as it gets passed down into generations, but I got the lot of it, and I really thought I was unwell. I started because I'd been abused as a child. I found girls very attractive at a very young age. It wasn't healthy. So I was dysfunctional. I'd missed out on early years of growth through the pain and misery. And this is not a blame game. I'm not blaming anything. I'm not blaming anyone. But I was in a state of shock from a very, very young age. I started to talk to myself. I didn't think I was very well. But I managed to put the mask on. And it sounds quite sad. It was sad. You know, my parents really never knew. My mother always had her arm around me because I think she could sense I'd struggled. And then I left school with no sort of qualifications. They tried to get me a job at a carpet shop in Malden in Surrey. I got on the bus, went there, and got on the bus home. And I think I lied and said I was late or something like that. I just didn't want to go. So my dad took me to work with him and Arthur Sutty. Lovely man, Arthur Sutty. And they had a commercial business selling lorries up in Battersea. My mum had a little cafe there. So I fitted in. I started to mess about. I wasn't a good mechanic. I used to watch the mechanic. There was a spray shop there. I used to try and sell a few things. You know, they gave me a bent MOT book. I don't think I can get nicked for that now. It was 40 odd years ago. And so I had these bent MOTs. I used to steal the the wheels out the trucks that they would come in and then resell it to the guy who was buying it. So I was always making up my wages, and you know, there was always stolen goods there that people would come in, and they used to call them the oysters. They would bring stuff in, and my dad used to buy it and say, "Go on, son, sell that." I started to drive at a very young age. It was always nice cars there. So I propelled into this sort of fantasy of being sort of a villain's son. You know, I was driving Mercedes cars about, and all sorts of things like that. So the sort of foundation of stability didn't exist for me. I was covered in love. Excuse me. And then I started to meet the likes of people like Eddie Richardson, Freddie Foreman, Frankie Fazer. You know, I met all them people who used to come up the yard. Excuse me. Excuse me. And, you know, then there was Joe Pyle, all sort of London, the Nashes. And I'm not name dropping. That was just a fraternity. And I wasn't impressed because it was what I'd been brought up around. And anyway, you know, I sort of left my father when I was about 18 at work, and I started stealing stuff, antique furniture, which I got arrested for. It was my first taste of prison, only on remand. But I went into prison, sort of people knew my dad there. So I lost my identity. I was someone else's son. The bigger the hole got, the more drugs I took, the more drink I took. And then I started to get around in West London. I started to sort of be very dishonest with women at a very young age, which I wasn't proud of. You know, I sort of done things that I'm not happy about today, but I'll get to that in the story. And so my life continued in crime. I still had this sort of horrible feeling about myself. I was at disease with myself. And the only time I felt all right was when I used. But that was only short-lived, because in the morning I'd have a hangover. I was either on coke, I was either stoned or drunk. And then I learned that you could go for a couple of days using, a couple of days of feeling okay, or what I thought was okay. Then the come down got bigger. And in this meantime, I met a young lady called Tracy, who became the mother of my 3 children. I have 4 children today, and I got 7 grandchildren, but I couldn't connect. I loved them dearly, but my head was gone, and so I used to, you know, have affairs. I used to buy their love, and I used to sit on my own thinking, what's wrong with me? You know, why can't I break through? And you know, I wasn't well. It's a fact, I wasn't well. Anyway, my first daughter came along, Amy. She was a beautiful young lady. She's 38 today, bless her heart, beautiful young girl. Oh, 37, sorry, Amy. And she was my firstborn. And the moment she was born, it was like, I never experienced anything like it before in my life. It was the most unbelievable thing, watching my daughter be born. It was incredible. And I remember a nurse saying, don't miss this. This is something special. And it was the first time that, after all my pain and misery, that I really connected with something that was very special. It was a very special love that I had, and I still do. But I couldn't manage it. I didn't know how. All I wanted to be was sort of feel normal. And I fought it for many years. Sadly, I did. And it's no excuse for the stuff I'd done, but we make our amends, and we move forward. And then I sort of got involved with selling drugs. I got arrested in a high-speed car chase. I wound up in a wheelchair. A mate of mine was very badly hurt. We both went to prison on remand. I got bail because there was minimal evidence against me at that particular time. I went to judge in chambers. And when I came out of the prison on a wheelchair, my dad gave me a backhander for being so stupid. And when the trial was due, because this guy was in quite a lot of trouble, he had other pressing charges. I absconded and went to live in Spain. I went down to Marbella, and it was there that I sort of got naughty again. I was doing a few things. This was in the early 80s. I found a little trick where I could earn some money. They was all down there, the famous, like something 5 they used to call them. You know, Freddie Foreman and his friends. They were lovely guys, to be honest with you. Very kind to me. Old Jackie Kramer, Henry Kennedy. There was some good old faces down there. And I sort of got myself in a few fights down there. I got myself in a bit of trouble down there. and then I started earning a few quid down there, and then very sadly, my grandfather on my mother's side, he got cancer, so my brother came down to be with me. Why we prepared for him to be passed away. Me and my brother went out one night. We'd used a bit of coke, and he wasn't really a user, this kid. And my father had met someone else. I won't call it an affair because he had a child with this girl, and he had a lovely young lady, a lovely girl called Alice. There's 7 of us all together. My dad had 7 children, and from 3 different relationships. Married 3 times, but 4 relationships where there was children present. Sorry, 3 relationships where there was children, and there was 4 sort of marriages that he had. So it was all dysfunctional stuff, and you look up to your peers, but you don't realise that your peers suffer with their own stuff, and you put your parents on pedestals. I was fortunate to have the mother I had, and fortunate to have the dad I had, because he taught me a lot. And anyway, when I was down in Spain with my brother, very sadly, we had an argument. We'd used some cocaine. He left the house. There's a little bit of a story there. I went and got him. It was early hours of the morning. He came back home. He needed some money. I gave him some, and off he went. And he drove to Malaga Airport. He stopped at a friend's of mine where his passport was, and there was loads of things that could have stopped his death. But I think it was his destiny. I really do. It must have been. He went to Malaga Airport. Sadly for him, on the way back, he went underneath a lorry and he got killed stone dead. The lorry went completely over him and squashed him. It was a terrible situation. That added it to the trauma that I could not believe. And he was on my watch, and I felt like I'd lost him. I took the blame for him. His girlfriend was 3 months pregnant. So the dramatic trauma that built up in my life. Now, there's no excuse for some of the things that I'd done. I'm not looking for excuses, but there was a reason behind it, because I always felt I weren't a bad fella. I was always ready to help people, earn money with people. I was, I was a kind guy, but I had this side of me that was very dark. It was also quite cowardly. It was dangerous when forced into a corner. It was also very game. I was very game at being a criminal, but I always had this voice, this low self-worth, this opinion. And the more I spoke the opinion, the more I became it. The more my thought pattern was that you're no good, you become no good. And all the beauty in your life sort of dissipates. I then had an affair with my wife's friend, which was terrible. Lovely Jane. I wouldn't, she, hello there. Welcome back. You're on mute.
There we go.
Welcome.
I do apologise
back.
about
How
that,
are
guys.
you? Don't worry about it. Nice to see you again.
I'm all right, mate.
You got a nice way about you.
Bloody connection.
Your signal's bad. Let me just check mine. Mine's okay.
But it still kept going on. Right. Brilliant. I lost where we were, mate.
I was up to the affair with Jane.
We do have a few technical problems, guys. But
my end's pure.
My signal's not ready. It's run off Ethernet cable. Right. Carry on then, mate.
You okay? You okay?
I am back on. You're fine. Hey, mate, I'm brilliant.
Do you want me to
Can you
carry
hear
on?
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. You've got a very nice way about you.
Carry on, mate.
You've got a very nice way about you. Very nice way about you. I can sense the spirit of God in you, which is nice. Bless you.
Mate.
Anyway, so I had an affair. You know, I'm not proud of this, but it's my truth.
Like...
Sorry? You good? And he had an affair with this girl, Jane, and I don't want to call her an affair because
I'm good.
She was a beautiful woman. And shall I continue? Hello?
Yeah, mate,
Hello,
continue.
Brother? Continue. So
Hello, mate, continue, you're fine.
Okay, I'll carry on. So I had this relationship with this lady. I was consumed from the 4-year-old child or 5-year-old child to my dad, to the death of my brother, to my drug addictions, and then this relationship I formed with my wife's friend. And I'll be honest with you, I don't care if there's any judgment. I owned it. I'm not happy about it. And it weren't the first. And I had a bit of a breakdown. And I went back to the mother of my children, the Rock of Ages, Tracy. She helped me get better. And then I went out to live in Spain. I went back to Spain after losing Martin. Now I went back to Spain, late 80s. My father had just come out of prison. He'd been arrested with Joe Parle for a large importation of cannabis, which they got out of, and quite rightly so. But the die had been cast. My dad and Joe had been at it with the cannabis for many, many years in the 80s. I wouldn't be telling you this if they was alive. And there was an influence from the States, America. There was influences from New York. It was organized crime. It was top organized crime. My dad and Joe Parle at a very young age. You know, Joe was into the unlicensed boxing. My dad got involved a little bit with that, but through the 80s. So it created money for me. I wasn't involved. I was on the peripherals. They had a great organization going on. There was an allegation that someone had got shot. I don't know who that was, but there was an allegation and things started to go wrong. I'm not saying that anyone shot anybody, but that was an allegation. I don't think it was whatever it was, but there was something went on, and I'm not a kiss and tell. As many, many years ago. And the guy's passed away now. I wouldn't be telling you the story. So anyway, and I wasn't privy for the information, so there's no sort of talking out of school here, but that was part of what we was about. Yeah. And I'm not a killer or anything like that, but you're around it. And when you're involved with organized crime at that level, you know, I'm not saying this, everyone goes around killing each other, but, you know, you got to be on point. You got to keep your mouth shut, and you got to be reliable. Prior to me being with Tracy, I'd had a relationship with a lady who was a beautiful lady. She's a leading fighter. She's a leading counsellor today, but she got me into the smoking, the freebase, which is crack today. So that sort of never helped for about 6 months. So all of that stuff was like, boom. So I lost the beauty of life. I lost my teenage years. And anyway, I went on to get arrested out in Spain. My brother died. I come back to the UK, had the affair with Jane. I went to prison. I was very fortunate. I got 3 or 4 not guilties. And instead of doing 5 or 6 years, I got 18 months. And quite rightly so on that case, actually. So I landed back in the land of living, I suppose, in about, sorry, I've already spoken about this, but I landed in the back of land of living, but where we got lost on the Facebook, I forgot this. I then, after the affair with Jane, wasn't very well, got myself better, and went out to live in Spain, in Marbella, at the end of the 80s, after my dad and Joe, like I said, had been arrested. They parted company. Joe then went and got 14 years. They say that was a little bit naughty, what they done to Joe there, the authorities. And then my dad sort of gave me the connections out in Spain and Morocco. I went out there and got involved in a high level of organised crime. You know, I was introduced to some very good people, and I jumped on it. I really jumped on it. It became a fix. It became an excitement, and we started to get involved at a high level of organised crime. I'm sorry if I jumped about a bit, but when the Facebook, when the Zoom, I sort of got lost a little bit, and I'm so sorry, because I'm normally sort of continuous with the story. But anyway, I was now down in Spain. I'd met this lovely young lady who at a particular time was a blessing in disguise. She was an Italian girl who lived down in Marbella. Her name was Daniela. Her father owned restaurants down there. And she come alongside of me. I think it was a moment of God, to be honest with you. She was very kind and considerate. I'd hurt Tracy, and now I'm in this big sort of smuggling story. I'd met a girl, and so life seemed to be sort of back on the up a little bit. And then I got arrested. I got charged with two counts, one for 2.5 tons of cannabis, and the other one for 4.5 tons of cannabis. It was going to be a long trial, but they offered us a plea bargaining, and instead of, we had a £3 million fine between 4 of us, which I think to do 6 years plus a lengthy sentence. So we was looking at between about 16 to 20 years. That included the fine. They had a plea bargaining with us to drop the first case, which was 2.5 tons, which they really didn't have a lot of evidence on us. But we were caught sort of red-handed with a 4.5 ton. There was 17 of us. They said there was about 60 officers there. I think 12, or I always get the number mixed up, 12 or 16 armed officers there. It came in on a boat in North Devon. As it began to be unloaded, they appeared. I wasn't there at that particular time. They appeared from nowhere, and they arrested the boat people, the fishmonger, the lorry driver. They was all lovely people. They're really nice people. They were straight people, hard-working people who was just trying to earn a few quid, I suppose. And, there was a lot of disaster there. A lot of them lost their businesses. My co-defendant was a guy called Peter. He lived in the village. He was a partner in the crime. So it disturbed a lot of things. And, you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So there I am, excuse me, sitting on the floor in a place called Bideford with a gun pointed at my head, fact. And it just seemed surreal, to be quite honest with you. It seemed really surreal. And in a way, it was a bit of a relief, to be honest with you. I got quite emotional at the scene of the crime over my children, not because I was arrested. I thought, what have I done to my 3 children? And it was that yin and yang in me. It was that broken trauma child and the adult trying to communicate. I struggled with it. And I was an opposite. I could be a very sort of brave man, but I could also be a very sort of frightened man. I couldn't never work it out. I'm not saying I'm not frightened of guns, but the guy, the copper, had a pistol pointed at me. He didn't seem to bother me. Yeah, I'm not frightened. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a big I am who's not frightened of guns, because I am. But just that moment, I was numb to it. It was strange, and it was surreal. I've got a big, strong voice, and at that particular time, I started screaming and shouting. Everyone, it was weird. Everyone stopped. There was pistol whipping my co-defendant. The driver, they'd already arrested about 13 or 14 people. I can't remember the exact numbers. Then they got Peter. They got the driver, bless his heart, old bank robber he was. They dragged him out of the car, and I was the last to be arrested. And I seemed to, it seemed to be that they had an importance about me, whether it was my dad or they had some delusional thought about me. They thought I was armed, which I wasn't. And behind the scenes, we didn't realise at the time, but this smuggling operation was attached to something, and this was big enough, but it was attached to something far greater than what we knew existed. It was huge. Nothing to do with us. We wasn't the organisation of all that, but it was organised crime at a high level. And there was people around it who were very dangerous. There was business people around it. There was a huge amount of money around it. They say that some of the shipping that we used was attached to the sort of cartels out in with the cocaine runs. That had nothing to do with us. But because of that, there was an intensity of surveillance on this operation. I think over 100 people got arrested around the world. They seized money in different countries, and they found copious amounts of Class A drugs, nothing to do with us. Our main objective was to get the cannabis into the country. That was our main objective, and we got caught. So the story was massive. When they used to take us to court, it was like the IRA being moved, and it was all down that we'd got arrested with such a lovely man. He wasn't really a gang. He weren't a gangster, this fella. He was a bit of a sort of, he was into nature, and he thought cannabis was a herb, but he was attached, obviously, to a large organisation. But he was harmless, this fella. His name was Dennis. He was a lovely man. And because we had him with us, I think what was going on behind the scenes, that I assumed, and we got told this, that they would try to take him off the bus, the prison bus. So the operation around us was massive. Prior to us getting sentenced, I read in the newspaper, prior to us, a day before we got sentenced, they revealed the story. It was massive. We wasn't aware of how big it really was, with the sort of the American CIA, there was European police involved, the English police. And so we'd found ourselves sort of in this plot, and the surveillance was intense. And that's why when we went to court, the police were there, there was helicopters, they was armed, facts, don't have anything to lie about. And once we was about to get sentenced, and everyone else, I think, had been sentenced abroad, I think it was called Operation Plimsoll or something like that, then the security came off us. And we was just basically now a drug charge of importation of cannabis, which was quite a lot. The intensity sort of came out of it. They had a deal with us to, like I say, hold our hands up to get out of the fine. Instead of the fine being 3 million, it was 400,000. I hope I'm making sense. And so I'm now sitting there broken, got 12 and a half years, which I accepted. The fine was down for me for 100 grand. And so it was all doable. It was all doable. But I was like a using addict. And then something happened to me. When I lived in Spain, and I mentioned Daniela, she'd sort of become very close to me, and she met my children. Tracy had sort of moved on in her life a little bit. And Daniela and I got married. And we got married, and we got married when I was in prison, actually. And I'm sorry to upset her, but we did. But what happened, she was friends with, I don't know if you remember the Page 3 girl, Samantha Fox. And yeah. Samantha Fox had become a sort of a celebrity Christian at a church called Holy Trinity Brompton, which was the home of Alpha, which is HTB, yeah, Holy Trinity, yeah, HTB. Do you know about HTB? I bet you do.
I do, yeah.
Okay. So, Nicky Gumbel and all them people, great church, fantastic church, great people as well. They put up with me. They've been very patient with me. And Sam was part of that church. Daniela was desperate for me to, I don't know what she was desperate for. So she went to the church with Samantha Fox, and she met Nicky Gumbel, and there was a revival. I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. But there was a revival in the church from something that went on out in, I don't want to sort of confuse anyone. There was a revival out in a place in Canada called Toronto, and someone went out there. It sort of, I don't know how it works, but it happened in the church, and things started taking place. And the fruit of that ministry is profound today, how they work in prisons with the homeless, with the broken, with debt. They've planted a low, I don't know how many churches they've planted, probably 30 or 40 churches, maybe more. And that was the manifestation of the blessing that happened in the early 90s. And I fell into that, not knowing. I don't know what I was doing. And I'm not a religious man at all, but I've always had a concept about spirituality. And for me, there's only one Spirit. It's via the Son Jesus, and it's the Holy Spirit for me. And it's all power. The fix that I've always been looking for in my life was available by me opening up my heart to something that was far greater than I was. And it's not been an easy walk for me. I've got to be truthful with you. But so she went to Nicky Gumbel. She told them about me. They prayed for me. And then one day I was in my cell reading the newspaper, the Mail on Sunday, and there was a picture in the newspaper with the church, with queues of people queuing up to go in there. And I said to my dad, "Oh, that's the church that Daniela went to with Sam and met that guy Nicky Gumbel, the owner, where they do the Alpha course." So I went down to the chaplain's office, not knowing what I was doing, and asked Bill to give him a ring. Don't know how we got through, but we got through to Nicky, very, very posh. "Oh, hello." And I sort of reminded him who I was, and he remembered. And I don't know why I'd done this. I invited him to the prison. I think he was a little, not frightened, but because he was a leading barrister. He's a great guy. But he said, "Oh, I can't come." And maybe that was how it was. And he sent a team down. Yeah, 5 people came down. And there was stuff going on in the prison. There was stuff going on in the prison where people were being prayed for and funny things was happening to them in the chapel. And I would thought, oh, that's not a bit of me. I used to use the chapel for other purposes, which were godly. Yeah. But then my dad said to me, "Why don't you just come and sit in church, but keep quiet instead of running about on these landings?" And I started to go in there, and I found something that was sort of nice. It was quiet. But I didn't give my life at all. I had quite a serious drug problem still in the nick. And I remember one night where I was smoking sort of skunk cannabis, and I had a panic attack. Things weren't good for me emotionally. And I woke up with the same feeling in the morning, but it stopped me smoking cannabis. Yeah, it helped me because I got a bit frightened of it. I don't know why, but I opened up the Bible, and in every nick there's a Bible. I went to the back of the Bible, and there was a concordance about divorce, about anger, about addiction, so many things. Well, not about addiction, but all sorts of things. And I remember writing everyone down, and I thought I related to at least 5 or 6 of the things that they were saying. And one of the scriptures that it sent me to, and I wasn't a Bible scholar, I always respected the Bible and the church. And listen, I used to always believe in God. And I know this sounds bizarre, but when I was at it, I used to pray that I would get the cannabis home. And it's a crazy prayer, and I'm sure God never answered it. I mean, we had a little bit of success, but I definitely don't think that was down to God. Well, I know it won't. So here I am in the cell, and I go to that scripture, and I'm not sure exactly where it is in the Bible. I think it was about the faith the size of the mustard seed. Yeah. And as I read it, I kid you not, just for a little while, the noise in my system of fear, anxiety, and anger, it left me. And it was enough to think, ooh, it was quite profound. What was that? And quickly the noise came back, but I never forgot it. Once Nicky sent these 5 people down to the church, I think that there'd been preparation and prayer by a number of people who'd got the same sort of vision and the same sort of guidance from God, I believe, without sounding too stupid. Because God is all power, all might, all love. He's not into wars, religion, and disaster. He's into loving us. But we tend to look down all the time on materialistic things and who we are. We never look up to the heavens. And when you think about it, it's a miracle that we can even breathe. It's a miracle that we spin round. It's a miracle that it's daytime here, it's nighttime in Australia. There's no electricians up there turning the lights on and off. But we take things like that for granted. Even the birth of a child, even a tree growing. You know, I don't know. But for me, it's about creation. And so there was a part of me that half knew that. But there was also a part of me that I couldn't stand the word. I used to hate the word born again Christian. I couldn't bear it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And I still struggle with that name a little bit. I don't struggle with being a Christian or being a faith-believing person. But that born again, and we have to be born again. So it's not to disrespect what the word's saying, but we have to be born again to come alive. And I think we have to do that daily. I have to do it daily. So I go along to this church, and like I say, the preparation had taken place with prayer and all that. I didn't have a clue. I was looking for an angle. I was looking to keep busy. You know, I put on a few charitable events in the Nick. We got Jimmy White was an associate of ours. He arranged to have a charity game with the world champion at that particular time called Ray Reardon. He come into the Nick. We had all the inmates all round the wing, all cheering him on. He played a couple of the prisoners, a prison officer. I mean, it was a great evening. It was like Christmas. It was fantastic. And then we had Samantha Fox come and do a bit of charity work in there. We got involved with MenCap. We had a number of charities. But do you know what? The intention was for me to do it for the purpose of good, but it was also the attention, what can I get out of this? And that's how I used to think. I used to think on my feet all the time. Anyway, I'll come in here a little bit. So we had that going on. So the church became something that I could get involved with. I didn't expect on this level. And today, I don't have the illness of the mind that I used to have. I don't have the malady of the spirit I used to have. And what I'm about to tell you was true. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. It was like my daughter being born, but times that by whatever you want to times it by. The feeling that I received when these guys came down to Exeter Prison, Emmy Wilson, a guy called Lee Duckett, Mark Perrett, and they just walked in, quite posh, some of them, you know, oh, hello. So the reason why I emphasize that sort of thing, because I think God's got a sense of humor. And it don't matter whether we're posh, white, black, Chinese, wealthy or poor. We're all human beings, right? Who I really believe are loved by something far greater than we can ever imagine. The mystery of the faith is incredible. And I think sometimes we're frightened to investigate it because the world says, you're a Christian, you're this, you're religious. And it's nothing about that. It's nothing about that. It's the purity of love. And when I received that, I didn't even feel worthy of the love of my wife. I didn't even feel worthy that I had a love for myself. I really didn't like myself. And that was a lie that I sort of developed. Didn't feel good enough. So I became a man of many masks. I got money, I got a big car, I'm a drug smuggler, I got a pretty girl. I mean, a complete lot of rubbish. It's okay to have money and a nice car and a pretty girl. There's nothing wrong with that. But when they become your identity, because you're not hiding who you really are, then I find that quite sad, to be honest with you. So these guys come into the church and, excuse me, there was about 20 or 30 guys, not all believers. There was about 7 believers. And I don't know what had happened to me, but about a week previous, I was in the church and this guy, John Coppin, who was a recovering alcoholic, he was a mate of mine. He worked in the Nick. He weren't a prison officer, he was a civvy, but we've become good friends, me and him. He died, sadly, about 10 years ago, but he was a blinder. And he suffered with the pornographic stuff, the drinking stuff, the sex stuff. But he gave his life to the faith. And he come in and he spoke the word of God through the love of Jesus. And I could see that he had similar struggles to me, but he pounded them, the wing, he pounded the landings. He was always seeing if you was all right. He wasn't a vicar. He was a lovely man, he was. Lovely man. A very flawed man, but a lovely man. And he sort of came into me and he was working on me. And I was saying to him, listen, John, how comes my grandmother, who was a staunch Catholic, suffered at the end of her life? And then he told me how Jesus suffered. Yeah. But it was sort of happening, but I couldn't. And then he said to me, do you know what, Michael? He said, I really believe that you've got a nice heart, but it's smothered with so much dysfunction, so much hatred. And when he said it, because I hadn't told him anything, I thought, how does he know that? So whether he heard it in the spirit or he recognised it in me, he got it right. And that was another little pull for me. So the mustard seed, Nicky Gumbel prayed for me one day. I didn't know he was praying. God is omnipresent. He was 300 miles away. But I remember feeling really peaceful that day. Some might say you was just peaceful, but I'm convinced that once I had sensed the peace of God, that those 3 or 4 situations was related to the preparation of me opening my heart to the truth. And I'm not a great Christian. I'm a work in progress, but I'm a lot better than I ever was. And that moment, they called on the Holy Spirit. And I don't mean to freak anyone out or drive anyone mad or think this is strange, because as much as it seems odd, it was the only thing in my life at that particular time that made sense. Because the feeling I got from it wasn't an odd feeling, wasn't a weird feeling. In the Bible, when King David had been caught with having the affair with Bathsheba, and then he got her husband killed, it was massive. But God says, and I'm not justifying that behavior. In Psalm 51, it says, cleanse me with hyssop and I will be clean. But then he goes on to say that God desires the truth in our innermost being. And I paraphrase that the dirty part of the soul, God will touch you there and he'll give you the wisdom to understand it. That's what I take from that. But it's just not a one-off. It's a development. This ain't for the faint-hearted, this. Because following Jesus ain't easy. But the blessings are incredible. You get judged, you get mocked. Not so much today, but early days. And then you get judged. I've done a lot of talks in big places, but I've also struggled while I've been doing those things. But the grace of God has been incredible. But so I went into this chapel. There was 20 or 30 people. Number of people had given their lives to Jesus. Like I was saying, I said the sinner's prayer when John Coppin was having a chat with me, the guy who was helping me. I hope I'm not getting confused, but I'm getting quite emotional, actually. Anyway, so I'm open to what's about to happen. Now, there must have been, let's call it 20 people. And not a lot of them were believers. There was like lifers in there. There was drug dealers. I'm not against any of that. I love them. There was a lot of sort of pain and misery in this place. And this guy came forward. And Emmy Wilson, prior to him coming forward, was singing "We Love You, Jesus," deep down in our hearts. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? What am I doing here? And she was quite a shapely woman. So all the guys are looking and there's a couple of wolf whistles. I leave it out, let's. So it was a bit comical, but that didn't stop the movement of love. It was an appointed time, this. It was an appointed time. And the preparation, the ground had been broken up for this time and in me. All what had gone on in the past, it was my moment. And they just said a very simple prayer, "Come, Holy Spirit." And, anyone's listening, you might find all this a bit strange if you don't believe, but it's definitely worth an investigation. If you need some healing or you want to change or you want to stop doing certain things. but it's not. It's a free gift, but it's whether you use it freely, because we only keep what we got by giving it away. And so they prayed this prayer. And there was a lot of funny things that happened in that room then. People started crying. People started shouting. A couple of things manifest in all sorts of ways. My dad fell on the floor. And no one could knock him on the floor. But my dad was an old-fashioned believer. You know, he was that sort of God bless you sort of thing. But he was also a very clever man. So he read the Bible quite a lot. But I believe his faith was real, but I don't think he sort of dived into it the way I did. But I got concerned when he fell over, but he was laughing. And, you know, the joy of the Lord. I mean, it's a big thing for me to be saying all this, but it's the truth. And I got touched. And I got touched where God said, I desire that truth in your innermost being. I got touched in my dirty soul. And I never felt anything strange, but I felt the peace. I felt, and the word that came out of my mouth was hope. And I thought, God, it don't have to be like this no more. And the prison officers were there. Mates of mine are going, what are you doing in there? That's for the weak. That's for the vulnerable. Well, I was weak and vulnerable, but I held it tight with all my masks. And they say, surrender is weak, surrender is strong. And I'm not trying to convert anyone. Or you might think, oh, he needed it because of his behaviour. Yeah, I did. I wanted to change, but it ain't been easy for me. I went through the prison system after that, and we started Alpha. I never, but we went to the chaplains, and it was hard because people were saying we were sort of well known, and it was a pride thing. And I think the word love is what was pregnating into me to disarm the stuff that I'd built up. But I'd built up walls, concrete walls, that you was never knowing who I was because you'd have thought I was mad. And there was another part of me that survived incredibly. And that's why I can testify that through my trials and tribulations, that what it says on the tin begins to happen. When I come out of prison, I relapsed crazily. I relapsed. I had another affair with my dearest friend's wife. It was awful. As a Christian as well. It was awful. I was back to square one. The spiral went out of control. I then had a child with another lady, a beautiful child. And I was gone. And all the work I put in, I didn't feel worthy again. And so I just acted out constantly. I got clean. And I lost everything. I had businesses. I'm not showing off, but we owned Kasabian, who was a music group. We was involved with supermarkets, radio stations, flower business, and property. And I lost all that. You can't, you build on sand. But you know what it was? They were my masks, and I don't think the truth could get into me. I wound up in poverty. I wound up homeless. Not that I ever lived on the streets. I wound up in debt. I borrowed money off people I shouldn't have. And I prayed it all works itself out. But I do believe that God used everything. I was in danger. And as it was all unfolding, my dad got very ill. We had to go and live on a farm. Talk about the prodigal son. We was doing the pigs, feeding the pigs with nothing. And, some people said just desserts. But my faith didn't say that. Excuse me. My faith says that I will restore to you the years of locusts have eaten. And in that restoration, he restores your heart, he restores your mind, he restores your truth. And it ain't religion. I read my Bible, I pray, I do the big book study, the 12 steps. I sponsor a couple of people. I've got to sponsor myself. And I think I'm well thought of in a way, even with the people I've harmed, because I do believe that they saw this dual character in this guy. And whatever God's put me on this journey, this way, I'll never know. It's been very difficult at times. But when I was down on the farm with my dad with no money, funny enough, we had the Boomtown Rats come and stay there. They was relaunching their career, and that was quite enjoyable. We was there, Bob Geldof, but sadly, he was there when his daughter died, God rest her soul. So there was fun there, but it got hectic again, and I stayed there for a number of years with no money. I created a butcher's round. I bought second-hand clothes. Not there's anything wrong with that. I was gone. I owed a lot of money, and I don't think anyone believed me anymore. I got dismantled. Someone stole a lot of me. I lost all my businesses. I'd lost my best friend. I had to leave the children behind for a little while. It was pretty insane. It was chaotic. It was chaos. And as much as I was the orchestrator of it, I really do believe it was something inside of me that was driving the sabotage, the destruction. I didn't find any peace. And in all of this, you'd think I'd find no peace when the trouble came. But it's where I found my peace. I started to let go of certain things that I thought were right. Me and my dad was living off of his pension. And it was our work. And I was working, selling the pigs for our keep. We wound up in a lovely house there that the banks was trying to get back off of a dear friend of mine. We managed to live there for a number of years, looking after the house. It was rats there, bats, all sorts of animals. It was a funny old story, but one I'll never forget. I'm very grateful to Kim, who helped me do that, and her husband Lewis. But everything always ended in tears because I could not establish myself back in life to the way I wanted to. And I started to realize that until I'm sort of connected to the truth, then the truth has set me free. And it's not the obvious, it's not what you got on the outside, it's what that's why I never judge anyone. And trust me, I'm not mad, I was. And there was a childlike spirit from the trauma that never left me. So I was a big man getting old and still had the trauma child that had never been healed. No excuses, it's the truth. And anyone listening, whatever you need to do, if you're happy with your life, if you're not, there are things you can investigate. You ain't got to listen to me, but there are things you can investigate, and there is stuff that can help you just achieve peace and fun. And it's okay having lots of money or having a big car or a big house. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's who we are in it. Idols, it become quite idolic for me. Anyway, after being on the farm, I had to leave. There was an altercation there. And then things started to get a bit better for me. I started going back to church. I got a job at a homeless shelter. God provided homes for me, unbelievably, with no money. Friends were kind. They were lovely. I wouldn't go and get help from the government. I was too proud. And sort of things started to take shape. And as they started to take shape, I started to realize that what God does, he does. And I think he's doing it moment by moment for every single one of us. It's just that we don't listen to the soft voice. We listen to what the ego or pride saying. And if we give our mind a chance, if we stop, maybe meditate, not even say anything, you start to hear your heart. And this is all about heart language. This is all about learning to love yourself, and you can love other people. Otherwise, I'd have continued as a criminal. I could have wound up dead. I could have wound up doing loads of burn in prison, or I could have wound up being a big drug smuggler again. It didn't exist. And you'd think that would be the obvious to get me out of my dilemma. I was in huge debt, huge. And anyway, so I left the farm. I started living in places. I went to work in the homeless shelter. Then I got approached to write this book called Sins of Fathers. It's been written like it's a Wikipedia. It's not a gangster book. There's gangsters in there, but I haven't been I haven't explained it a lot. It's not a Christian book, although it's about faith. It's about a journey. Yeah. It's about the journey of faith, from dysfunction to wellness, to darkness, to light, to the cross, to forgiveness, to redemption, to hope, to clarity of mind. And there's so much more that we're about to do. We're trying to open up a charity to work with the mental health issues, addictions, prisons. You know, we've got a big vision here. We've got a big vision here. And it's the first time in my life, I think, that I want to give it away. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm still sort of, I'm not saying I'm struggling financially. I'm holding my own now. But, you know, there's a big guy in here still who what he done in the criminal world, I'd like to do in the recovery world, in the faith world, in the Christ world, you know, and give hope to the struggling man. I'm nothing special. God's given me, I think, a gift to speak. I'm trying to be humble. And if I follow the truth, if I say my prayers, if I read my Bible, if I look at my big book, if I help an addict, or pray to someone, or give my time away, you know, we only keep what we got by giving it away, as I said earlier. There comes a peace. And the Bible said there's a peace that passes all understanding. And it's true. And don't try and understand it. Don't try and look for, you know, we try and work it out. You know, when we work it out, we get in the way. You know, the Bible also says that if you read my word, I will transform your mind. And the more I put in, the more I get out. Ego, pride, control, aggression, sexual addiction, you know, the class A, the alcoholic, it don't exist no more. And what exists is a new creation, I believe. There's no condemnation. So the book's out there. The charity we're trying to open, I'm getting myself back into life again. You know, there's a lot of stories that, and I'm not trying to put myself up there with people like Joseph or David. You know, they fell short of the glory all the time. And it took many years, but there was a purpose for it all. And I don't want to be the high flying, oh, I'm a goody goody. But I think for the experiences that I've got, there was an entrepreneurial man in here. There's a faith believing man in here. There's an honest man in here. There's a giving man in here. And he's being reborn daily. And all I ask that when it's all done and dusted, in the autumn of my life, I can enjoy. So far, I've got 7 grandchildren. And those 7 grandchildren have been a gift to me. I couldn't spoil them. Like, I used to fly my kids to New York, to the south of France, to Spain, to here. I travelled the world with Alpha. I've spoken in some unbelievable prisons in Uganda, in Hong Kong. I worked with Jackie Pullinger, that ministry, which was incredible, with all the triads out in our, and you know what? Her success rate of getting them boys off of heroin was 98%, and it was through prayer. It weren't through medication. It weren't through anything. It was through prayer. And if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever read it. I think it's called Chasing the Dragon. It's a cracking book, and I work with them.
Cracking book.
It is, isn't it? So I done work with them. I went out to Korea. I done a lot of work with a guy called Paul Cowley, ex-prisoner who became a vicar. A lovely lady called Emmy Wilson who came to the prison that day. Nicky Gumbel, Charlie Mackesy. You know, they're all in there. There's Bear Grylls. I shouldn't be talking about their lives, but they're faith-believing people. And they've got everything, but you think everything is everything, but it's not. What is everything is feeling loved so that we can love, being at peace so we can give our peace, understanding other people rather than being self-centered about our brokenness. So when I went around the world with Paul doing all these things, I was still struggling with my mental health stuff, but I got on stage and I delivered the message. Yeah, and I still do that. Message of hope. And there is hope for us all. I don't know why it's taken me so long. Sometimes I think, I wonder why, but I don't question that judgment of God or his will for my life. Or maybe he's going to me, it's already been done, hurry up. Focus on the truth more. I don't know. Step your game up more. But when I sort of went travelling with Paul Cowley and came back and I went on the farm and all those things happened and I started working in the homeless shelter, I sort of met a lady who's a very good friend of mine. We sort of got into a relationship and she worked with a Down syndrome girl. And she worked wonders with this girl. So I became friends with a Down syndrome girl over the last 4 years. And it's been incredibly beautiful. All she wants is a friendship and love. And she's not looking what I can give her or what I can't give her. I've got 7 beautiful grandchildren, like I said, who I couldn't spoil. I don't want to repeat myself, but I used to spoil my children with all sorts of things. But I had to be just a normal grandfather. I didn't have the money to send them abroad or buy them big Christmas presents. I had to give them my time. In that development of giving them my time, the 7 of them, they call me Pappy. And they've got other grandparents, and I'm not saying they love me anymore, but I have a connection with these kids because God opened my heart. He used my grandchildren to open my heart to love. And because of the value I have with my relationship with my 7 grandchildren, I start to have a value in myself. I'm not perfect. I'm still working this out. I'm still trying to get out of debt. I'm still developing this charity. I'm still working with the book. There's chances of doing a documentary. There's loads of other things that there's chances of. We've done a lot of work with this book. It's going okay. It's doing well. It's a big market that we're in. We're doing podcasts. But at the end of the day, it's become a brand. And we're putting the books in the prisons, which is great. There's been quite a nice order for the books to go in the prisons. So it just ups the ante all the time. And for me today is the word of God says the truth will set us free. I think I've said it a few times in this talk. And the truth is, not only do we believe in what the Bible says about Jesus is the Son of God, that's great to believe that. But we have the faith to believe that it can help us change. We have the faith to believe that the spirit that raised Lazarus from the dead is a spirit that dwells in us. And people might think, what's he talking about? Well, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. And I said it earlier. The same spirit that allows us to breathe oxygen, the same spirit that allows children to be born, the same spirit that activates, and I said it a few minutes ago, activates the being of this world. For me, that's the love of God. And if he can spin the earth around, I'm sure he can do anything for us. And then we go, oh, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Because it's what we do. It's what us humans do. We create wars. We create wealth. We create so much. And God says he's in that. And he wants to bless it if we give him the glory. And I'm not saying you have to be a Christian. I'm not saying you have to be anything. Work that out for yourself. But for me, this is what works. And I have to work it every single day. And so I'm happy with my grandchildren. I'm getting happy with my life. I'm getting happy with Michael. I'm so sorry for the people who was on the receiving end of my dysfunctional behaviour. I never meant it. And although I repeated it a lot, and I'm really, really sorry. But I just want to let you know that very soon, all will be well, because it's well now. All will be different. And I pray that the magnet of light that comes through what we're trying to do attracts the broken, not to me, but to the truth. And I hope that we can have a page or a site or a care home or a home for the homeless, a home for prisoners, whatever God sees fit. I pray that we can utilize all of this stuff for the goodness of love, for the goodness of freedom, especially freedom from the addict. And there's no judgment from me. There's no. All I understand is if I judge anyone, I'm judging myself. I'm not trying to break anyone's sort of anonymity or try to impress by name dropping. I'm not trying to give you a big story so you go, wow. I think what I'm trying to express here in a very kind, loving way, that no matter how far we fall, no matter how much pain we're in, there's a way out. There is a way out. And I think God will use anything. He used a donkey in the Bible, but I think he'll use anything for us to understand his love. And I'm very happy to be speaking here today. I hope I've said enough, Christian. You're not Christian, look at me, Gregory. It's been lovely. I know we've had a few up and downs with the connection that put me off a little bit. I'm so sorry. But I kept losing my train of thought. But I hope anyone who's listening, it might have helped someone. I hope I've done your program justice. And I hope I've shared the truth. Amen.
I want to thank you so much for that, mate. I find myself a little bit overwhelmed, filled with the Spirit. I relate to your story so much, from the lack of identity to trauma to not dealing with it to the disconnection, because that's what addiction is. And just, I love Alpha with all of my heart. I'm about to start at number 20, Alpha 20. And it'll be my 10th helping lead in my church. I absolutely adore it. I adore Nick the Vic.
Bless you.
It touches so many people. I've seen this course, this course changed me from a man who'd had a massive breakdown and no confidence, to the, it's got a lot to do with the man that I am today. It's a lot to do with the reasons I get men of faith on here to speak about their stories. I've really felt your story from just the very beginning. I feel incredibly touched to have been able to accommodate this. I'm incredibly blessed to be able to get to know you, because God is just so good. He's given me a life that I never thought I could have.
Bless you.
He is the healer of the broken. I always saw church as I always thought church was a like a museum for good people, but it isn't. It's a hospital for broken people.
Amen.
And that's what we are. We're so broken, and to have that connection restored, because that connection that we lost was a connection with God. To have that restored, to have that voice, just to have that, you know, ability to be able to communicate with God on a daily basis is just an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much from your story, and I look forward to, you know, we spoke about the possibility of doing some stuff together, and I look forward to that.
I'll
Thank you
definitely come
so
down.
much for
Oh. Bless you.
yeah. Sorry, yeah.
No, you're lovely. Carry on. I'll come down and see you.
All I was saying was, yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be nice.
Bless you.
You know, relationship. That's what we need. We need a relationship with other strong people, but people that have, you know, we're all cut from the same cloth. You know, and that cloth was doused in sin, but with the blood of Jesus, it's clean. Absolute pleasure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the feed in a second on Facebook, and we'll just have a quick wind down, if that's all right.
Can I just say something to you before you go? Just 1 second. Before you cut Facebook, if I've made any mistakes on the way, because it was a little bit whatever my fault, I just hope this blesses people. I hope they can hear the message, and it's been a real pleasure for me to participate in this thing with you today. I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, guys. I shall speak to you soon. This has been an absolute mind opener, a soul cleanser. I'm overwhelmed. So I shall see you guys soon.